Shabir Ali. Tonight it's going to be about the existence of God. And well, what we have tonight is a formal debate. And we have Shabir Ali, and he is from the Islamic Information and Dawah Information Center. And he graduated from Laurentian University. He is an Islamic scholar. And he hosts his own TV program, Let the Quran Speak. It's a national program. He's also the author of many works, including Common Questions People Ask About Islam and Science in the Quran, amongst many others. He's also a guest speaker internationally. And also we have Christopher Carlo, and he's got his PhD in philosophy from the University of Waterloo. He's been a professor here at the University of Guelph, teaching philosophy. He's won the College of Arts Teaching Excellence Award in 2001-2002. He's also presented many scholarly works. He's specialized in everything from bioethics to cognitive evolution. And he's also currently working on several books, including How to Become a Really Good Pain in the Ass, a practical guide to thinking critically. So tonight, what we have, starting a bit late, we have in our agenda, each of the gentlemen will be having an opportunity for 20 minutes to present their side. Following that, they will each have a 10-minute rebuttal. And then after that, they'll have 5 minutes of clarification each. And then we'll have questions and answer period, which you can come down either aisle, and we'll give you a microphone. You can ask them any question, but to keep it short, we want to get as many questions in as possible. So what we'll do is we'll start with Shabir Ali, and please welcome him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all of you, for such a warm welcome. Thank you, Dr. Carlo, for sharing the evening with me. It's my honor and pleasure to speak before you this evening, folks, and I'd like to get straight to the point in view of the limited time that we have. Now, first I should make it clear that we cannot prove or disprove the existence of God. And no matter how much we argue about it, as we have done for thousands of years, we will still have a world in which there are believers and there are non-believers. People who assert the existence of God and people who deny the existence of God. In fact, having it this way is a part of the belief system to which I hold. I believe that God created the world such that there will be people who will believe in God and some others who will not believe in God. But God will be choosing from among human beings those who, even though having the opportunity to not believe in Him, would nevertheless freely choose to believe in Him, to love Him, and to have an everlasting relationship with Him. And God, indeed, will be choosing these people to have an everlasting relationship with them. So it is mutual. And that means then that at the end of the day, the arguments we will present will not be conclusive, will not be hit them over the head, the types of arguments that will knock them dead and make them all believe. In fact, there are passages in the Quran which indicate that if God had willed, He would have presented such kinds of proofs. But it is not His will to have it done that way. It is His will to leave it as it is, such that there are indications for those who have the will to believe, and at the same time, excuses are left available for those who do not wish to believe. This, then, is coherent with the system of belief that I hold. But having said that much, I think that there are very good reasons for believing that God does exist. One reason is what philosophers have called a cosmological argument. They have asked, why do we have something here instead of nothing? And there are basically three reasons given for the existence of the universe. One reason is to say, well, there is no reason at all. We just simply happen to be here by chance. But you can see right away, especially if you're a science student, that a reason like this is not a reason at all. If a science teacher were to ask, why is the water boiling? And a student replies, well, there's no reason at all. It just simply boils by chance. That obviously is not an acceptable answer. The whole of science is infected with the idea of causality. You must find the causes behind things. So to just simply say, no, the universe just happens to be here by chance, is not a sufficient explanation. We may have to resort to that if we could not find a better explanation. We'll have to say we just simply do not know why the universe is here or how it got here. But if we can find a better explanation, we ought to look for that. A better explanation has been proposed by saying that the universe necessarily must be here. It must exist as of its own necessity. Well, we can easily see that this reason fails because, in fact, we can imagine that the universe didn't have to be here. It doesn't have to exist. It is not such a thing that must of its own self exist by necessity. And so we must look for a third explanation. And a third explanation that has been given is that God created this universe. Now, if we think of it, then we realize that this explanation is entirely plausible, so plausible that even an atheist will admit that this is a plausible explanation. It is plausible to suppose that such a being does exist who created the universe. Difficulties will arise when we attribute specific traits to this being. That is when the atheist will think that we have gone beyond our epistemic rights and introduced ideas about a creator that we could not sustain based on the facts that are available. But the very idea that there is a being such that brought the universe into existence, I think, is a sufficient starting point for the rest of points that will follow. And my second point that follows from that is that when we observe the universe, the best that we can study it, we realize that there is design or apparent design wherever we look. Now, as far as the design in biological entities, evolutionists have said that what appears to be design, in fact, is just simply the result of many incremental changes that have occurred over thousands of years, and that these incremental changes, beneficial if they were, remained and added to the final products that we now observe, having the appearance of design, but were not actually designed by any intelligent being. They just simply happened to come as a result of these chance changes that occurred over time and accumulated. But as we study further, we realize that there is design no matter where we look, and we cannot escape the idea that there is design in the universe. Scientists now believe generally that the universe exploded in a Big Bang, or came into being as a result of what is called a Big Bang that occurred some 14.8 billion years ago. And we cannot study what happened before the Big Bang, nor can we study what happened exactly at the very moment of the Big Bang. But as far back as we can go, we see evidence that the universe is designed. In fact, all of the four physical constants, the force of gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, all of these are said to be precisely fine-tuned as they are, and had they not been within a very small ranges, had they not had the critical values that they had, our universe would not be here, and obviously we wouldn't be here talking about it tonight. And so the evidence that there is design in the universe goes right back as far as we can study. And this shows that no matter how we look at it, there is evidence not only that there is a God that created the universe, but that this God is a designing entity. Third, Immanuel Kant was not satisfied with my above two arguments, and he introduced a third, which became popularly known as the moral argument. His argument says that when we do things, we have in the back of our minds an idea of what he called the categorical imperative. We ought to do something, not for the benefit it brings us, but just simply because certain things are right. Now, the ancient Greek philosopher said that the purpose of human activity should be the maximization of happiness, especially your own happiness. So Immanuel Kant is looking at this and saying, well, it looks like we should be doing things that maximize our own happiness. But when we sacrifice ourselves for others, we are not obviously maximizing our own happiness, at least not here in this world. So we are in fact working within a broad scheme in which we take it for granted that there is a life after death, that there is God. Our very actions, based on this categorical imperative, is an indication that this idea of God is built within our very system. So we cannot turn away from that. Putting it in a different way, the philosopher Tom Morris, in his book Philosophy for Dummies, says that we have this moral sense in us. And where does this moral sense come from? There are basically two explanations for this. One is that we accumulated this moral sense as a result of many generations of cultural and biological evolution. But he thinks that if that were the explanation, that would better explain certain evil tendencies within us, or what we would call evil tendencies. The tendency to, for example, kill others and get away with it, survival of the fittest. We should behave in the manner of the law of the jungle. But in fact, we behave in a higher plane. We think of higher ideas. And where does that come from? If the socio-biological evolution is not the best explanation for this, the other explanation is what Tom Morris prefers, that we are imbued with that moral sense from God, who is the source of moral goodness. And so we have 3 points here, which taken together form a cumulative idea of what this God is like that we speak about here tonight. But we can take it further than this. We can look back in history and we can see that as far back as we look, people have had a sense that there is something bigger and greater than we are, something that we must have a relationship with. And not only is that sense very vague as far as we look, but we see specific manifestations of that sense, especially in the Hebrew prophets. When we read the Bible, we see that there are prophets who are driven by some experience they have had, a kind of a calling from, they said, God. And we see in the lives of some of these men that there is no reason for them to come forward and preach this had it not been their inner conviction. We see, for example, Isaiah acting in a very remarkable and strange way, preaching the results of his encounter with God. We see the prophet Jeremiah, people who faced persecutions, and they preached things which at times they themselves could not fathom. Jeremiah was saying that certain things would happen that he himself could not explain. And yet, as a result of his calling with God, he was willing to go forward and preach this message. Look at Moses. Moses, as far as the story goes, had no reason to go back to Egypt. In fact, he had reason for fearing returning to Egypt, lest the Pharaoh should grab hold of him and put him to death. And yet, as a result of his encounter with God, he was bound to go back to Egypt and preach his message. Jesus is a controversial figure. Many theories surround Jesus, who he was and what he lived for and how he died, how he left this world. But what is certain in historical studies is that Jesus, towards the end of his career, he went back into Jerusalem when it was obvious that the religious authorities of his day would put him to death. Jesus, for what he preached, for his opposition to the extremist religious views of his day, was willing to go into Jerusalem and face the consequences and the opposition. And that speaks to a deep-felt conviction that he had that God had spoken to him and had a close relationship with him. We see a similar thing unfolding in the life of the Prophet Muhammad in 7th century Arabia. Here is a man who had no reason to come forward and preach the message that he preached, and yet he faced persecutions from the enemies, such that independent historians of religion have concluded that Muhammad was sincere. When he said that he had a revelation from God, he really did believe that. We see that in the fact that he refused offers from the enemy. They would have made him a ruler, but he refused that. They offered him wealth, but he refused. But he kept preaching the message in face of persecutions. Now, we have a remnant from the Prophet Muhammad's experience. That is the glorious Quran, the sacred book of Islam. Now, let me give you a kind of historical reminder of how this book came to be. And then we will look at whether there is anything in this book that indicates the truthfulness of the Prophet Muhammad's experience with God. Now, historians will tell us that the Prophet Muhammad spoke in a way that is somewhat akin to the preachers and poets of his day. He recited verses to people. And eventually, that these verses were all collected together, and after his death, within 2 years, or some say within 14 years, definitely by the Caliphate of Uthman, the recited portions that Muhammad had left behind were now collected into the book that we call today the glorious Quran. Now, in our century, it became possible to do word studies on the Quran, because now we're able to lay things out on broad tables, we're able to enter things in computer systems, we're able to count words. And what is amazing is that when we count the words in the Quran, some patterns emerge, and these patterns show that the Quran has some divine input. that could not be credited just simply to the Prophet Muhammad. Or to say, to put it another way, to say that the Prophet Muhammad is the author of this book completely would not be, I think, a viable hypothesis. Look at what we find. If we ask how many times the word man is used in the Quran, then the answer is 11. And the word woman also 11 times. Why this coincidence? Now you have to remember that the Prophet Muhammad, over a period of 23 years, he recited verses commenting on certain circumstances, occasions. A battle might be ensuing and he would be commenting on the battle. There might be a marriage going on and he's saying something about love and marriage and about personal relationships. All of this together, all of this wisdom put together into one book. Now if you're asked to write an essay and make it within 2,000 to 3,000 words long, now you'll be struggling. Sometimes you go a little bit over, sometimes you're a little bit short, and you have to find ways of making that work. But what if you're asked by your professor to use words which are antonyms of each other an equal number of times? Imagine the difficulty. But then we notice that the word angels occur in the Quran 68 times, and so also the word devils, exactly 68 times. The word for this world, dunya, 115 times, and so too the word in Arabic for the life hereafter, akhirah, 115 times. The word for life, 145 times, and for death, 145 times. The word for month, shahr, in the singular, occurring in the Quran exactly 12 times. The word for day, yawm, in the singular, occurring exactly 365 times. This is remarkable because it could have been any other number, and it didn't have to be 365. And if it were not 365, nobody would complain because there is no reason why it has to be 365. When you write a book, you're not compelled to use the word day 365 times. And yet the very finding that it is so points to something bigger and greater than the Prophet Muhammad, because this obviously was not a product of his own mind. And then we notice that the word land and the word sea actually rhyme in Arabic. They're bar and ba. The word land in the Quran occurs 13 times, and the word for sea occurs 32 times. At first, there do not seem to be any apparent relationship between these two numbers until you realize that 13 to 32 is the approximate ratio of land to sea. What accounts for this remarkable coincidence in the Quranic text? Well, in 1976, a man in the United States, Dr. Rashad Khalifa, fed the Quranic data into his computer systems, and he came up with some results which were false, but some others which were remarkable. He came up with claims for himself as a result of this kind of finding, which the Muslim community did not accept. So I do not want to settle those claims here, that's not my point. But I want to deal with those bits of information which he has put forward, or at least some of it, which we can present within this short lecture, to show some of the factual information about the Quran, regardless of who said it, which nevertheless should give us room or give us reason for pause tonight, and for us to think, where did this book come from? Some of this information has been compiled in a wonderful little booklet entitled Al-Quran, the Ultimate Miracle by Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, and he has presented many lectures based on that information. Very quickly, the Quran in Surah 74, verse number 30 says, over it are 19. And within the context, that is obviously referring to the place called hell. There are 19 angels over hell. But this statement, over it are 19, made this researcher think, what else could be in terms of 19? Now it was noticed that the word Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, or that phrase, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, is actually written in 19 letters. Now it doesn't have to be written with 19 letters, but Muslims have accepted by convention the way the Quran was written 1400 years ago, and they have kept the writing the same way. If we were to write this phrase in modern Arabic, we could very easily use 22 letters. But the very fact that Muslims have kept conservatively to the text the way it was written has meant that this phrase is preserved in exactly 19 letters. So it is written with 19 letters way back then, and then it is discovered way later, many centuries later, and then that becomes part of a number of numerical coincidences. Let me explain. Now this phrase, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, occurs in the Quran at the beginning of every surah. So that's a way of thinking, over it, over the surah, are 19. Now this same phrase has a different meaning here. Now curiously enough, Surah 9 in the Quran does not have this phrase, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now, there are 114 of such surahs or chapters in the Quran. Now, 114, incidentally, is 19 times 6. Now, if we had Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, or this in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, at the head of every chapter, then we would have exactly 114 of them, and that would also be 19 times 6. But when the Quran was compiled, one of the chiefs said, at the time, Uthman, said, I cannot recall whether or not Surah 9 is a separate surah or whether it is also part of the preceding one. And so, to reach a sort of compromise, he placed it as though it were a separate chapter, but he omitted the phrase which comes at the beginning of each chapter, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And so by this remarkable coincidence, we have it now that we still have 114 chapters, which work out to 19 times 6. But we have only 113 of these phrases in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, until we realize that that phrase itself becomes part of a surah in Surah 27, verse number 30. So it turns out that this important phrase also occurs in the Quran 19 times 6. I only have a minute left, but very quickly. The first surah to be revealed of the Quran is now, or the first part of the surah is what is now in Surah 96, the first 5 verses. When we count the letters that have been revealed in this first revelation, the first 5 verses, we see that there are exactly 76 letters, which work out obviously to 19 times 4. And the rest of the surah contains 209 letters, which work out to exactly 19 times 11. What accounts for this remarkable coincidence? And by the way, the verse numbers were put in much later, and it turns out that this surah also has 19 verses by people working independently, and all of these worked out coincidentally to turn out to expose this beautiful mathematical pattern. What accounts for this except to say that the Quran indeed is a revelation from the Almighty God? We can go at length on this, but the point is already made. Lastly, I would like to say that we know as believers that God exists. There are many in this room who have experienced God. Now, why should we give up this belief for no reason at all? We've already seen that we have very good reasons for this belief. Now, unless we can see reasons for removing this belief from our minds, we should hold on to that belief on the principle of belief conservation. I'll leave that with you. Thank you very much.
Now we'll have Dr. Carlo present his side, the arguments, and then
Good evening. I'm to take the no side of the does God exist debate. I've been asked to do that tonight, so that will be my job. Very eloquent proposal by Mr. Ali for the yes side. No offense, but you're wrong. Some interesting things said, and I've never heard them said quite like that. Very, very articulate and very well put. A number of things we can consider right off the bat, and we go to the next slide. I think there are a number of things we have to consider in terms of making knowledge claims about God, and I think your point was a very good one. We don't know, right? And for those who do claim, or would claim to know of the existence of a particular God, and it escapes me to think that you could just say, just as easily, that, no, I don't really know, in fact, that this God exists, but I'm just going to kind of go along with it. Nutty idea that it is. I just think it's right. So I think what happens is with religious belief, any particular religious belief, there is an implicit claim to knowledge. Yeah, yes, you have faith in it, but your faith in the particular belief of this particular type of deity is the strongest faith you have, and so therefore enters the realm of knowledge. If you are a true believer you have belief of a God that is usually unshakable, and so it reaches up into this high epistemic realm of what we could consider knowledge to be. So you're right, we can never prove or disprove the existence of God. There are believers and non-believers. They choose to believe and to love Him, and that this is apparently mutual as well. Well, I'm sorry, you can't just get away with that. When you say you have belief in this God, that transcends up to the level of knowledge. And correct me if I'm wrong, your belief in your particular religion is probably the most important belief that you have in your life. Therefore, I think it's fair for me to make the inference that it enters the realm of knowledge. So I am going to treat these as knowledge claims. I'm not going to just kind of slip that by and say, well, we cannot really prove or disprove this. You really believe it's the case, so I'm going to act on that particular belief as a knowledge claim. Now, it mentioned in the introduction and in the posters and whatnot for this event that I'm an atheist. I'm actually an agtheist. It's this word I've invented that means I'm an atheist towards all organized religions, because I don't think any of them can show demonstrably that they've nailed down an understanding of ultimate reality. And that's really what we're talking about here. These are no small claims, folks. You claim God exists. That's the way the universe is. Okay? It's not like, oh, I prefer watching Friends. It's not like that. It is very, very powerful information about the way the world and the universe actually is. Okay? So, I'm an atheist when it comes to all organized religions, because I just haven't come across any one of them that has been able to shed inconsistencies and contradictions, which undermines them in some way. But when it comes to whether or not, say, the universe was intended, I'm an agnostic. Because I really don't think you can side one way or another. I mean, the evidence could pull you one way or another, and I think you can argue for or against that. However, into the realm of knowledge, no, I don't think that is possible. So I've invented this rather ugly word known as atheism that distinguishes one who is an atheist towards organized religion and an agnostic towards the possibility of the universe being intended. So I think it's basically epistemically irresponsible to believe in the universe, especially created by a Muslim or any defined God. Secondly, such a belief falls far short of knowledge, and your beliefs do enter into the realm of knowledge. Third, I will demonstrate what can be known of a God and, as you mentioned, an afterlife. Fourth, God as creator is no more real than the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, or Santa Claus, at least the way in which it's been defined historically. Moving on, I maintain that religious belief developed really for a need for three things. People needed an explanation of the causality in nature. Mr. Elliott, you mentioned at one point that people, the prophets, for instance, realized that there were things bigger than themselves. And I think that's an excellent point. I think that's exactly what they had experienced a long time ago. Only they didn't have the conceptual framework by which to understand what was actually going on at the time. So what would have then been considered miracles and unexplained, without the inclusion of this mysterious force known as God, I simply think was a prototype of science. They just did not have the capacity to explain certain phenomena. So they used what's known as the God of the gaps explanation. There's a gap in their explanatory conceptual power. They don't know anything, say, about volcanic activity or earthquakes or things like that, or comets in the sky, which they often thought were omens. Supernova, right, in which we have the Crab Nebula now, which happened about 2,003 years ago. So they looked upon these things as being signs from the heavens. Now, I consider that to be perfectly consistent with human evolution and cultural evolution. You don't have the conceptual schema, you see these things occur. Wow, this is powerful. If you people have ever been in a powerful storm in your lives, if you've ever been near a volcano, in an earthquake, in any powerful force of nature at all, you have the sense that something very, very significant is going on. And it might scare the heck out of you. It might put the fear of God into you, so to speak. And that would have made a lot of sense a long time ago. Why? Just simply didn't have the words, the concepts, to be able to explain to them naturally what was going on. Since those didn't exist, fill in the gaps with a God. Perfectly consistent, makes sense. True? That's another matter. A guide for moral behavior. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, our God is just. God is on our side, right? 3 most idiotic words uttered in the last year or so by President George W. Bush, God bless America, which ultimately and significantly divided the U.S. from the rest of the world. The level to which this man's idiocy reaches has not yet been fathomed. No machine has been able to measure that yet. Nonetheless, if God is on his side, who's on the other side? Just a true bush basher by nature. So, a guide for moral behavior. Why do bad things happen to us? Well, don't worry. Don't worry. Now, if you read the Quran, and you read the Old Testament, and you read the Torah, God doesn't mess around. Okay? You fool around with God, you're going to get kicked. Okay? God will smite your enemies, and he is on your side. Why? Because you are the chosen people. Well, I'm sorry. The Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians can't all be the chosen people. You may think you can, but you can't. Why? Because your religious beliefs differ too much. You may think you're all believing in the same God, but the way in which it's defined in the Torah, Quran, and Bible are so different that you cannot actually believe the same thing. And then, of course, there's the problem of what's known as critical exegesis, which is how are we to interpret the words of the Holy Scriptures? Whose say is best? Roman Catholics? Jews? Which type of Jew? Which type of Christian? Which type of Muslim? I have friends who are varying degrees of orthodoxy in Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faith. Who's right? The Anglicans? Presbyterians? Mormons? The Jehovah's? Right? The Raelians? No. Who's right? Who are we to believe? Well, we are. Well, who's we? We is whatever group I happen to be in. We know how to interpret the Bible, the Quran, or the Old Testament, the Torah. So you stick with us and we'll get you through life. We'll present you the most clearest picture of reality. I'm sorry. You cannot all be right. All those religions cannot all be right. They cannot all be talking about the same thing because they talk about it in extremely different and contradictory ways. However, you can all be wrong. A need for immortality. I think it makes good sense to consider the evolution of culture in terms of religious understanding of an environment, in terms of what would have happened to our ancestors at a point at which they recognized that they were going to die, that they actually realized that. Do you really think other animals, other mammals, have a sense of impending death? Perhaps, right? In some vague sort of way. You shoot a deer and it's bleeding and it's running away. Does it have a sense that I'm going to die? And that could be it for me. Thus ends my existence as I leave this world. Oh, horrible angst that it is to be a buck. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they don't think like that, but I haven't crawled inside a deer's head lately and really, had any kind of telepathic, connection, some kind of Vulcan mind transfer with a deer. But humans were capable of doing that. And there must have been some point at time when we began to become capable of this ability. And that would have been a very significant turning point in human cognitive evolution. You realize you die. That puts a whole new spin on things. Survival now means a lot. It's not just DNA pumping away, keeping you going and getting you to survive and reproduce and whatnot. Now you have the reflective capacity to realize, I don't want to die. I've seen that guy die and he's not getting up anymore. I want to continue to keep going. I don't want to be like that. Okay? And so I think the concept of immortality was a buffer. It was a cultural buffer, what Richard Dawkins would call a mean, a unit of information that actually eased the suffering of our ancestors. See why he's not really dead? He's not. He looks dead. Well, yes, he's dead, but not. What do you mean? And so, the concept of immortality as life after death came into being as an evolutionary buffer. It actually increases the likelihood for survival. It could actually reduce levels of depression. Think about it. Religion does a lot of good, believe it or not, for a lot of people. It gives them hope that there's something else. Faith in something that's greater than the sum of the parts. However, it is ultimately unknowable. And it is that, a matter of faith. It has its benefits, there's no question about it, but it also can be abused, and historically has been abused. And it's used as a tool to put people in power and do all sorts of nasty things to other people. Now, there are a lot of great messages in the Quran, the Torah, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, many different types of Holy Scriptures. Great messages. Concept of forgiveness. Amazing. Amazing message. The ability to transcend your DNA and not want to kill the other guy who hurt you is not an easy thing for us to do. Our DNA is saying, get even, get back at this person. And the concept of forgiveness is a cultural form of mental discipline that says, no, I'm not going to do that. That's amazing for a species to be able to do that, because I don't think primates yet have that capacity. Someday get it, and maybe they do in their own way, but not to the advanced level that we do, where we can reflectively think about this. So there are many great ideas in these scriptures. There are also some not so great ideas as well. I just don't think we necessarily need a God to pat us on the back and tell us, we're doing a good job. We can do a good job with or without these scriptures. Forgiveness is just a good idea. It allows us to get on with our lives. The great Christian that George Bush is. He learned a little bit more about forgiveness, you would think, but I guess that's not the Texas type of Christian. I don't know. Weird hybrid thing going on. You talked a bit about evolution, Mr. Ellery, and there is design in the world, and essentially that evolution is wrong. We cannot escape the fact, you said, that there is design. And it most certainly seems like there is design. Darwin himself noticed this, that it is amazing that the world seems to function so well. The problem is that it looks as though it is designed, but don't forget, we're talking about billions of years of trial and error to get to the point at which you were looking at the completed project. So the reason why the hummingbird's bill fits into the flower so well is not because Allah, God, or Yahweh made the hummingbird's bill fit into that flower. It just so happened that those birds that had the genes which allowed it to grow a bill like that got into the flower and thus improved its chance of surviving, to reproduce and make little birdies with bills just like that to fit into those flowers. Those flowers die off, and those bills have nowhere to go. Bye-bye birdie. Now, one thing we'd like to mention is that 99% of all species that have ever been on this planet are extinct. If God had designed things so well, how would they still be around? Is this a failure somehow of God? A flaw in the design plan? No. It just makes more sense to think in terms of genetic variability and natural selection. It just describes what we see and what we experience better. That's all. The claim that God created the universe is a knowledge claim, that is to say it's epistemic. These need to be justified or proved. So what are the particular reasons for this? What are the reasons for this particular knowledge claim? Go ahead. We have to define what knowledge is. Okay. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old, approximately. I'm not sure to what extent it mentions the age of the universe and the world in the Quran, but if you're a literalist creationist, and you do the math of whom begot whom in Numbers in the Old Testament, it works out to be about 6,000 years old. There are those who maintain that the Bible is literally true. I'd be interested to know to what extent you take the Quran as being literally true, or what it actually has to say about, say, a fact about the earth like this. How do we know the earth is this old? Well, we have dating techniques. Now, carbon-14 dating, that only helps to about 50,000 years or so. We have potassium-argon dating, argon-argon dating, and we have methods for determining the decay of certain types of elements in various features, various physical features, rocks and things like that. And you can measure this decay rate extremely accurately. Now, that the Earth is this old, 4.6 billion years old, or that the Earth is 6,000 years old, shows a bit of a discrepancy. One bit of information comes from Scripture. Others come from techniques that we have developed. Very clever people have developed these techniques, and they can be used all around the world at different times in different places and get the same results. What is more responsible to believe that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, as science tells us it is, or that it's 6,000 years old, and that you really have to suppress all that nutty fossil evidence and all those strata of layers upon layers over time? What makes more sense? So basically what I'm saying is, it is more reasonable when we're talking about the natural world to understand it in terms of what our methodologies can produce that are reliable and efficient and replicable, that people can do them in other places and come up with the same results, shows a certain amount of objectivity. It's not as though one scientist is saying, yeah, I think it's around 4.6 billion. Does that sound good? Yeah, are we agreed on that? Okay, pass the tuna salad. No, it's not like that. It's done over and over and over again, and so becomes embedded as scientific knowledge. Okay? Could they be off? Yeah, I suppose, a couple million years. Yeah, they could be off. But we're talking in terms of millions of years. And if the Earth is that old, then you have to realize that evolution is an extremely long process. And given enough time, it will produce beings like us and like everything else. So, that it seems to be designed, you're right, it does seem to be designed. However, the great example that's used by Richard Dawkins in Climbing Mount Improbable is that those people who see design in nature see the finished product, and they fail to consider the possible steps that might have led up to it. Like the eye, the human eye, which is far too complex for evolution to have produced it. No, that's wrong. There are very good accounts that show how eyes have developed, and our eyes are by far perfect. You have a blind spot, the way in which the optic nerve enters the skull. Why would God create us, or create eyes, with such flaws? Remember, evolution just has to produce species that work well within its environment. Not perfect species, just those that will work well enough to reproduce and make other species that function well, or relatively well, in an environment. The bridge example that Richard Dawkins uses are those archaic ones you see in Europe, the stone bridges that have no cement in them, and all the blocks are fit in a certain way. And you would look at this bridge and wonder, how is that possible? How could people have put those stones in? They didn't have cranes back then. Some god, some great god must have brought his hand down and put those stones in together. And that's not how it was done at all. Wooden trusses were built, and the stones were placed on the trusses, and then the wood was burned. And as it fell, the bricks fell into place. That's actually gravity that makes the arch incredibly strong. That's how it was built. Once we understand the process, then we can understand the effect or the end game. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. My time's up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carlo. And what we'll do now is we'll have a 10-minute rebuttal from Shabir Ali.
Dr. Carlo thinks I'm wrong, and what we'd be interested in knowing is, why does he think I'm wrong? We'd like to hear specific replies to my points already presented. You'll recall, folks, that I started out by saying that there is a good cosmological argument for believing that there is something that brought the universe into existence. Second, that there is a design argument, what philosophers have called a teleological argument. Design in the universe right from its very inception. Third, the moral argument. We are moral human beings, and we should ask, like Tom Morris, where did that moral sense come from? Or we should realize with Immanuel Kant that by working with that categorical imperative, we are in fact working under the assumption that life is bigger and greater than what we perceive here. We are working with the understanding that there is a life hereafter, that there is a God. Fourth, I've spoken about the religious experience that have been shared by a large number of people throughout history, many of the prophets, for example, who have been reported about in the Hebrew Bible, and lastly about the Prophet Muhammad, whose Quran we now have and we can examine. And I've shown that when we look at this Quranic text, we see evidence here that this is bigger and greater than he could have consciously produced himself, and we have evidence here, or signs indicating a divine presence. And fifthly, I have argued that we, many of us at least, have an experience of God. We have read the Quran and felt that God is speaking to us. We have made the Hajj and felt the presence of God in that place, even though we don't believe that he actually dwells in a particular place. But the very fact of the closeness that we have felt spiritually with God, fasting in Ramadan, or perhaps in some other religions, people have experienced other ways of feeling very close to God. Are we to give away that understanding that we have for no reason at all? Now, we have given very good philosophical reasons for believing that God exists. So we should ask Dr. Carlo and others, what reason is there for thinking that God does not exist? Is there any proof that God does not exist? And the answer to that, sadly, is no. And this is why we notice that Dr. Carlo actually qualifies himself as an agnostic. So far as the question of organized religion is concerned, he is an atheist. He is against organized religions. But so far as the possibility that there is a being who willed the universe into existence, he is an agnostic, which means that he's telling us he does not know if indeed such a being does exist. Now, that may be epistemologically justifiable. He is within his epistemic rights to say, yes, I do not know. But we should ask, is that a practical position to take? Now notice, when the agnostic says, I don't know if such a God exists, he ends up, in fact, acting as though such a God does not exist. Think about it for a moment. When a believer says, I believe that God exists, that believer acts as though that God exists and tries to have a personal relationship with that God. If an atheist says, I believe that God does not exist, the atheist, of course, doesn't have anything to do to get close to that God who doesn't exist. If the agnostic says, I don't know whether God exists or not, how does the agnostic behave? Does he try to get close to that God, if perhaps that God is a living reality and has a plan for us? Or does the agnostic settle back like the atheist and say, well, I must as well live my life as the atheist, pretending that God does not exist? I think then that agnosticism is not a practical position in this case on the question of whether or not there is a God. Because if there is a God, then that God means all that there is to us. Pascal put out what he referred to as, or what came to be called Pascal's wager. He said that if there is a God, then believing in that God, in fact, would guarantee us infinite happiness. And refusing that God would, of course, deny us that infinite happiness. The only one who can gain in that gamble is the one who puts his faith or her faith in that God. In fact, one who puts faith in that God has nothing to lose, and the other has everything to lose. So in fact, if we are unsure about whether God exists or not, to me, the practical position is in fact to believe in God. Now Dr. Carlo says that this in fact is short of knowledge. Here I come standing and saying, well, we believe that God exists, and I pretend that this is knowledge that we have. What I would say is that we should honestly proclaim that we do not know that God exists in the same way that I know that this podium or this lectern exists. But we know different things in different ways, and we seek different levels of confirmation for different things. For example, in a court case, we do not demand absolute proof that a certain person is guilty. But what we demand is proof beyond reasonable doubt. Here we demand a very different level of proof than we might demand in a scientific laboratory. When we ask the question concerning God, does God exist or not? And when we think of that possibility that is offered to us, that God exists, and He has this plan for humankind, which I mentioned from the beginning, then all we require here is not evidence beyond any reasonable doubt, but sufficient evidence to confirm that that experience that we have of a living, real God, that evidence is, that belief is not misplaced, but that there is good psychological reasons, there are good philosophical reasons, and there is a proper scientific basis for believing that God exists. If someone were to come and show us evidence that God does not exist, then we will have to say that experience we had is all wrong. All of these reasons seem to be misconstrued, and we must believe that God does not exist. But in the evidence of such proofs that God does not exist, why should we think that the knowledge that we do have of a God existing, that because it is falling short of the laboratory sort of proof, that it should not be accepted? If we were looking for something physical, we would need physical evidence. If we're looking for something spiritual, perhaps what we do need is a spiritual experience. And many of us already have that. So no, believing in God is not like believing in the Easter Bunny. There are many people in the world who believe in God, but would not believe in the Easter Bunny. We draw a sharp line of distinction, knowing the Easter Bunny to be our own deliberate invention, and knowing God to be a real living experience that we cannot get rid of no matter how we think about it. Now, is religious belief actually a development, as Dr. Carlo says, from human beings' need to explain causality, for moral behavior, or for immortality? Now, it is clear that religion provides all of these benefits. It explains causality, it gives us a ground for moral behavior, and it gives us hope beyond mortality. But to say that these are the benefits of religion is different than imagining, as Dr. Carlo has imagined, that these were the reasons why religion came to exist in the first place. There's a difference between the two. Dr. Carlo has not given us a shred of evidence to think that human beings actually invented religion for these reasons. Is there any quotations from any ancient text that will tell us that for these reasons people decided to invent religion? I would plead that the case is no. So to just hope that people invented religions for these reasons is not to disprove the existence of God. Moreover, even if people did in fact invent religions for the wrong reasons, even if they did invent the idea of God for the wrong reasons, that by itself does not prove that God does not exist. We still have good reasons for believing that God exists, and although, unless those good reasons are erased, we still have them. Now, is plurality of religions a problem? Plurality of religions becomes a problem when we go to specific interpretations of what God means and what His plan for us. But if we ask the basic question, is there a God who created this universe? Is there an intelligent being, a moral source, who has a plan for us? Then the answer to that seems to be yes, in a wide variety of religions. And the plurality of religions then is not a problem. Dr. Carlo is right. We cannot all be right when we differ in certain things, but we do not differ in everything. There are many things on which we are together, we do agree, and in those things we can all be right. Even though, true, we can all be wrong. But we have good reasons for believing that we are right in these basic propositions. Notice that when I presented these basic propositions, they were not propositions just presented within the point of view of one specific religion. They were general propositions that could be agreed to by a Hindu, by a Buddhist, by a Christian, by a Jew sitting in this room. There are philosophical reasons that I've given for the existence of God, such that even one who does not share a particular religious view can still appreciate it. So, finally, I would argue that the evidence from evolution is not an evidence against God, because evolution could in fact be the manner in which God creates the universe. Dr. Carlo wants to know a little bit more about what the Quran teaches about the age of the universe. I would gladly tell you that the Quran has transcended some of the biblical problems, like the age of the earth, the fixity of the species, geocentrism, the universality of the flood, and other problems reasons that people have found to be scientific difficulties in relating the Old Testament in particular to our modern concepts. The Quran has transcended these difficulties, and that gives me more reason for believing that the Quran is a revelation from the Almighty God, and that God does exist.
You cannot prove or disprove the existence of God, that there are believers and non-believers, and that there are those who choose to believe and love Him, and that this experience is mutual. You maintain that arguments will not be conclusive because this is not His will. Question, of course, why isn't it His will? Why not just have Allah walk through that door and say, by the way, I exist. Okay, enough of these debates. Carlo, you're wrong. I'm here. What do you want me to do? And we all converge. And we all do as He says for us to do. Why the mystery? Okay? Why is it His will not to really let us in on the secret? Seems to be a problem with that. You may retort by saying, but we see it everywhere. We see it everywhere. We see it in the glory of the love between two people. We see it in the majesty that is the growth of the family, and the bonding of the family unit. We see it in the wonder of education. Do we also see it in the devastation of cancer for 2-year-olds? Or is that not God's work? That's someone else's? That's our work? Do we see it in the wonder of acts of terrorism? I don't think so. How about natural disasters, earthquakes, killing thousands of people in Turkey, 3,000 of them being children below the age of 6. If He's got a plan, it better be a good one. Because if He takes one of my kids away from me, He better be really, really justified in doing that. Because I'd rather not have my kids leave me just yet. So, why the mystery? The cosmological argument, no reason for our existence. You maintain is not a reason. I don't know why that would be the case. It makes perfect sense to me to imagine the universe having just come into being. Why should there have been a creator? What created the creator? Oh, nothing. He's self-sufficient. He's a necessary being. So is the universe. No, that can't be. Oh, yes, it can be. If you need empirical evidence for this, why, just go to Alan Guth's website at MIT and look at the ways Mr. Guth has described the possibility of quantum fluctuations in a negative vacuum to account for why this universe could have accidentally come into being. And that it just happens to be the universe that came into being. There were millions of other universes that came into being but just didn't quite work out. Sounds like cosmological evolution to me. Trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. Whoa, got it right. Okay? So there doesn't necessarily have to be a creator for the universe. The cosmological argument doesn't work. Therefore, it is plausible, you say, that such a being does exist, which created the universe. I don't find that as being plausible. Certainly not any more plausible than it could have come into existence sheerly by accident. When I say I'm an atheist, that means I'm an agnostic in terms of whether or not this universe was intended. Let's imagine that the universe was intended, that a being actually somehow created the universe to be. Why does this being then have to be the one described in the Quran? Why couldn't the being have long since died? Why couldn't the being have just enough power to have created the universe and now is no longer with us? Why couldn't it be a childlike being that created this universe, made a lot of mistakes, including us? Because we are not designed very well, folks. We're petty, we're simple, we're arrogant, and we do a lot of nasty things to each other. Why wouldn't a being make us a little bit better, morally? Well, because He loves us. Huh? How so? Well, because we have to build moral character, you see. We have to prove ourselves to that particular being. I see. How? by having him take away my 2-year-old child with bone cancer. That's going to build my moral character? No. You take me away, fine. You don't take my kids away. I don't think that should happen to build anyone's moral character. He's gone. Now, what appears to be design is really the product of natural selection. I mentioned this in my first 20 minutes. It appears to be design, but it's not. The 4 forces that you mentioned, strong and weak, nuclear, electromagnetic, and gravity, that are precisely fine-tuned, implies, if I'm correct, that it needs a tuner. If there's a watch, there has to be a watchmaker. And no, the universe just happens to be this way. It spat up a planetary system that gradually had beings like us evolve to be able to have the capacity to wonder what it's all about. And that could be all there is to it, folks. Could the universe have been intended? Yeah. What would that intender actually be like? I have absolutely no idea. I'm willing to consider what that intender could be like, if such an intender exists. But at this moment, I have no reason to have my life ruled by what may actually not be the case. I cannot attribute any qualities to an intender of the universe, and I don't think anyone else can. And when they try, they add up entities far beyond necessity, and they usually run into contradictions and inconsistencies. Now, Tom Morris, you mentioned, philosophy for dummies. He's a very good writer, by the way. Talked about a moral sense. We think of higher planes because we are imbued with a moral sense. Back in times, there were things bigger than ourselves and whatnot. There was Isaiah, had this inner conviction. Jeremiah could not fathom the greatness that is Allah. Well, why should I listen to Isaiah and Jeremiah rather than, say, Timothy Leary? Why shouldn't I just take acid every day and then just experience God that way? Why should I listen to these particular people? Why not what I would consider modern-day prophets? Right? Who's to say they had any kind of special status to tell me about what God was really all about? Why couldn't I just figure that out for myself? Jesus' conviction that God spoke to him. I'd be interested to know whether you think Jesus was the Son of God, or the Messiah. Conflicts in religious belief lead one to skepticism and to doubt, because if you don't believe he was, there's about 1 billion people that are going to disagree with you. You can't both be right. Muhammad, from the Quran. Count the words of the Quran. Well, it's interesting, man and woman appear 11 times. Angels, devils, 68. The world, the hereafter, 115. Life, death, 145. Month 12, day 365. Land and sea, 1332. Hey, that's pretty neat. Seems like a rationalization now. I bet there are mathematicians in this room, right here, who come up with more eloquent ways of understanding this world in terms of numerical representation. Leonardo Fibonacci certainly comes to mind, and the patterns of numerosity that he saw in nature were astounding. The phi ratio, for instance, 1.6, right? Your mouth, if it represents 1, and the side of your face will be about 1.6 that distance. Why? Did God put this type of numerosity into the world? And there are studies that show we have a certain attraction to certain ratios. Was God behind this? Is God behind the numbers? Or did they just happen to be that way? The fact that there are these numbers in the Quran in no way indicates to me that God has to be behind it. I see no reason to make the connection between this type of numerosity and God. I don't see it in pi, I don't see it in the phi ratio, I don't see it in any great, interesting ideas that have come up through mathematics since our origins. They're interesting, okay, but that's about it. There have been very, very clever people incorporating these particular symmetries within a particular work. I'm sure it could be replicated today quite easily. You say, many of us have experienced God, the Hajj, Mecca. I would love to go there. I cannot go there. I'm not of that faith. That's too bad. I would very much like to go there just to experience what goes on there. Not for any religious reason, but for a social reason. Are we to give away that understanding for no reason, you say? What reason is there for us not to believe in God? Well, Pascal's wager, you mentioned, that you err on the side of eternal happiness. You believe in God, and if you're right, you get eternal happiness, right? Putting faith in God, one has nothing to lose. Really? How about autonomy? How about your freedom to decide for yourselves what's right and wrong? Because we're all capable of it. We do it every day. You may think you're acting according to a God, but if God doesn't exist, and I'm pretty convinced none of the ones defined so far do, then we've been doing it for millennia. So we really don't need God at all. I think I'll stop there.
Now, Shabir and Lee will have his 5-minute response to the arguments. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carlo, for that engaging response. Folks, I have this last opportunity to speak before I take your questions. And in these 5 short minutes, I'd like to reply very quickly to some of the points that Dr. Carlo has made, by way of clarification. First, why should it be the will of God such that the proof of his existence is not a knock-them-dead proof? Why doesn't God just simply walk in here so that everyone will believe in him? Well, my understanding is that God does not force us to believe in him, because if he were to force us to believe in him, then our obedience and love for him would not be our voluntary offering of that love. If God wanted to create creatures who would freely choose to love him, then he could not at the same time force us to freely choose to love him. And his walking in here and proving himself to be God, in fact, would be to do exactly that, would be to force belief in him. And what he's doing instead is to leave us free so that he would select from among human beings those who, given the level of evidence we do have for the belief in God, would put their faith in God, would give up some of their autonomy for God, and would not demur, as Dr. Carlo has stood here and demurred and said, I do not want my life to be ruled by such an intended one who intended the world into existence. So our belief then is coherent in this sense. Why doesn't God just simply walk in here? Because he leaves us free to believe or not to believe. Now, why are there things like cancer, natural disaster, such as earthquake? Why is there things like terrorism? Well, there could be many good reasons for this. God, for example, could be allowing the universe to function in what we refer to as a law-like way, which just simply refers to the orderly manner in which God continues to evolve and to create the universe moment by moment as we go. Now, if he's to do things with such regularity that we can describe scientific laws, then we have certain benefits. We can actually study the laws that govern the universe such that we can start in some way to take control of our environment. Moreover, we can then, in fact, become morally responsible beings. If things happen haphazard, so that there is no effect predictable from a certain action, then we could not then be moral beings, because we would not know what would be the result of any action that we perform. If God wanted us to be moral beings, then he orders the universe in such an orderly, law-like manner, and the same laws that give us the formation and development of the universe are the same laws that produce things like earthquake and volcanoes and cancer. How do we have things like terrorism, which are the deliberate actions of human creatures of God? Again, the answer for that is that God has given human beings free will, so that God cooperates with human beings in allowing their free wills to be manifested, so that their actions, freely chosen, can find actualization. If God was going to block every evil action that somebody intended, then in fact human beings would not be free to do evil, but only free to do good. And if they're only free to do good, then in fact they are not actually free. And so all of that fits in within God's plan. And Dr. Carlo is right. If God does have a plan, it better be a good one. And we believe that God does have a good plan in that He will bring together human beings all together in an everlasting relationship with Him, if human beings would also choose to want that relationship. But if a human being would demur and say, no, I do not want to have such a relationship with that God, well then, God also would not force that person into having that personal relationship with God. Now, did Dr. Carlo reply adequately to the cosmological argument? I think not, because in the end, he says that it is plausible. It's just not more plausible than to say that the universe came into existence by chance. But to admit the plausibility of that is to admit the possibility that God does exist. And it doesn't have to be the God of the Quran. It is the God that we understand that has sufficient power and knowledge to bring the universe into existence, and that happens to be the God of the Quran, without getting into specific details. Now, what about the appearance of design? I have admitted that the appearance of design seemed to be explained by the evolutionary argument until we realized that it is more than this, that right from the very beginning, design is evident. And in the end, I think Dr. Carlo has to admit that, yes, it could have been invented. And he says that, yes, it could have been intended by a God who designed it such, even if there are other explanations that Dr. Carlo may choose. So that's about all the time that I have, and I think, on the whole, my 5 arguments for the existence of God are good, strong arguments. They have not been answered to adequately. And the choice is still left before us. Some may choose to believe based on these arguments. Some may choose not to believe. And we hope that those who choose to believe are doing so for the better. And those who choose not to believe can be sure about their choice tonight. Thank you.
And lastly, before we have questions, we have Dr. Carlo.
Thank you. Right. God does not prove His existence. He does not force us to believe in Him because it would reduce our freedom to choose to believe in Him. Now, unless I'm mistaken, Allah is all-knowing. He's all good. He's all-present. And He's all-powerful. We have a bit of a problem, though. If God is all-knowing, then He knows exactly what I'm going to say in the next 5 seconds. Not only that, if He would have known that 1 billion years ago. Why? Because He is so powerful. If such a God actually exists, we have a major contradiction in our defining terms of what God is. Omniscience, folks, rules out free will. Okay? I decide tomorrow to have for lunch the pasta primavera. Lovely baby carrots, green beans, nice olive oil and garlic. Delightful. Refreshing, actually. And if I happen to have that, God would have known this. God would have known I would have done this billions of years before I was born. Now, if He knows what I'm going to have for lunch tomorrow, He knows exactly how I'm going to end up after my demise, or at the time of my demise. So He knows whether I'm going to be naughty or nice. Why not cut to the chase? Get on with it. Because then that makes life a charade. I have no free will. You have no free will. God knows exactly how you're all going to end up. The only way God can allow you to have free will is if He blinds Himself somehow from this capacity. If He does that, He is not omniscient. He is less than all-knowing. Fine. If you're willing to admit that, you may get free will back. If you're not, they're irreconcilable. You do not get free will. How can you possibly prove yourself to freely accept Him into your lives if He's already that powerful and that all-knowing? And the answer is, you cannot. Why natural disasters? God allows the universe to behave in a law-like way. This is very nice of God to do this. Regularity equals scientific laws. God's laws allow us to take control over our environment, and therefore to better act in an autonomous way to show our worthiness to that God. Does God have to function according to those laws that he himself made? If he does, we run into contradictions. Right? Let's see God create a rock so large that he himself cannot lift. If he cannot do this, he's not all powerful. Right? Paradoxes. How do we take control over natural disasters? We maintain that the regularity of nature allows us to take control over our lives. But how do we take control over tidal waves, earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes? I don't see how we can. We can maybe educate ourselves better about them and duck and cover. Hey, that's great. But people still die all the time because of natural disasters. Why? To build our character, to build our moral character? Well, I have to side with David Hume at this point. Build our moral character, it's fine. But don't build it so much. Okay? Kill a few thousand Turks rather than 10,000 of them. Okay? Take me rather than my sons. Okay? Build their character. We're young. I've lived long enough. You take me, I'll go off to the promised land or whatever. Let them live a little bit longer. God has a good plan. He has an everlasting relationship with us only if we want a personal relationship. The question, of course, is, what if we don't want this? What if I have good reason not to want this personal relationship because I just don't have any cognition of any such intending God whatsoever? Nothing has communicated to me in any way, given me any reason to believe that there is an intender. Not that I'm shutting that out of my life. I'm too good of a skeptic to do that. If it occurs to me, great. Then I'll be the first to say I was wrong. But it hasn't happened yet. So I'm going to live my life in the most responsible manner I can. And that doesn't mean blindly following something that may not exist at all. I think we have better ways of trying to deal with ourselves and others, resolve conflict, and get along with one another without having to appeal to something that in all possibilities does not exist. If I choose not to believe in this God or have a personal relationship, what will become of me at the time of my death? Does Allah forgive me? You're a little screwed up, but come on in. I don't know. I don't know. And if he doesn't, why not? Surely it would be a great challenge and a magnificent task of Allah to convince a skeptic of his existence. I'm still waiting. Thank you.
Okay, now it's time for questions and answers from both the debaters here. And how we plan to do this is, if you don't mind lining up on the sides of either room, and we'll go between both lines, and we'll have a run with the microphone so you can ask them any question. Also, on your desks there, we've also got feedback forms we'd most appreciate. So sometime by the end of tonight, if you could fill those in and hand it to us, would be most appreciated. And so we'll have questions right through to 9:30, and then following that, we'll just have their conclusions. Thanks very much.
You say that there's no such thing as, that we have free will, and if there was a God who was omnipotent, then we couldn't have free will, right?
Correct.
But what about the fact that, those natural disasters where you'd rather, or the fact that you'd rather have you die instead of your son, but if your son dies, you can't, you have no choice in that matter. So does that not disprove the fact of, that we actually don't have free will, that, whether your son dies or you die, you don't have a choice in that. And there goes your free will to choose.
Right. I'm not sure I understand the question. How does it tie in with the idea of God? That's what I'm...
Well, it just shows that we don't have a free will, and if there is a God, then he's a God that, like, we don't have free will with this God, but that's possibly because this God exists outside of time. And as the Bible says, it talks about the foreknowledge of predestination of foreknowledge. So possibly means that he lives out of time, so he already knows what's going to happen, and it's already happened in his eyes.
Right.
But
it seems to us like there's nothing we could do about it.
Yeah, because once we so he already knows it, but that doesn't. So we're destined to where we're destined to.
Exactly.
But he's also given us, like, as we walk along in life, he's given us a chance to choose certain things.
No, he hasn't. You just said we were predestined. That means we don't have the choice. You're right. It seems to us like we do, right? I can pick up this flower pot and throw it at you. I'm not wanting to. I have no reason to, but I could. It would seem like I have that freedom. If I did, he would have already known. To me, it seems like, hey, I'm really acting like this. Meanwhile, he's up there saying, hey, Michael, Arcade, come here, watch, Carl's going to throw this. Watch it. Anyway, he's going to hell. I created him that way. I wanted Carlo. Just bad-mouthing me all these times. I have no time for that. So you're right. We are predestined. You said it, and it seems like we're free. You're right. You're right on both counts. But if he is omniscient, what seems to be like free will to us is not in reality to him. So it only has the illusion of free will. Now, I'm not saying there are not ways out of this. Okay, I'm not saying this is an irreconcilable conflict or what's called a religious tension or a tension of faith. I just think people who are of religious belief have a responsibility to work on this stuff. And of course, there are all kinds of great Christian and Muslim scholars who make it their job to think about these things and try to reconcile these problems. You could limit the knowledge of God, which sounds... it goes against the traditional notion that God is omniscient, that God is all-knowing. Because if he doesn't know what we're going to choose, then he isn't omniscient. He can be close to it, but even if you define God as being really, really, really knowledgeable, but just doesn't know how we're going to behave, that might be a resolution to that particular conflict. And yet I'm so surprised when I talk to people of religious faith. They will not give up the idea that God is omniscient, that he knows everything. And you really have to appreciate what the concept of omniscience entails. It means that should such a being actually exist, as described by the Muslim, Judaic, and Christian faiths, as being omniscient, do you know what that entails? Can you even conceive of what that would mean? This being would know exactly how many hairs are on each one of your heads now, and for all eternity would know this. It would know how many molecules of O2 you are taking and converting to CO2 now, and for all time. He would know how many molecules are in this room right now that compose everything that is actually existing. It would know all of the laws under which all of those things are behaving simultaneously in this incredibly complex mixture that is the universe. Omniscience is no small feat, folks. It is an amazingly powerful concept. But if you attribute it to a being, you better be aware of what that entails. That means what follows when you call something omniscient. And it means no free will. So you have to cut back on the omniscience somehow to get your free will back, or reconcile it somehow.
We have no free will.
No, I don't. Not if you have
free will.
I believe we have some free will so far as we perceive it. However, we might be entirely determined. All of the forces acting on me and you and everybody in this room might eventually cause me to throw this flower at you. It could.
So quite possibly free will is the thing that we're not willing to give up.
It could be an illusion. It could actually be an illusion.
I just like an omniscient being could just be an illusion also.
Oh, yes, very well.
So free will, and both, like, someone who believes in God doesn't want to give up omniscience, and someone who doesn't believe in God doesn't want to give up free will.
Correct.
So then we're both
damned if we do, damned if we don't.
We'll just go on quickly to the next question.
I'm allowed to respond to that, yeah. If I can get my own 2 cents worth in this, I think we should notice from Dr. Carlo's last comment that in fact free will and determination or predetermination is a problem not only for religious believers but also for naturalists and atheists. Because if we take a naturalistic world as our worldview, then everything now is an effect of something already gone by, a previous state of physical conditions plus some natural laws and some effects. And those effects will include also our thoughts and our actions. So even if we exclude God from the picture, the atheist is still dealing with a predetermined world. In other words, the atheist still has to think, I really don't have any free will, do I? Because I'm just simply a materialistic being that is a product of previous physical conditions plus natural laws. So what I think I'm freely choosing, I'm not in fact choosing. And this in fact was the essence of Dr. Carlo's last words. But now if we think about the problem for religious believers, we realize that in many religions, especially in Christianity and in Islam, we adopted the idea of the omniscience of God implying a predetermination and a lack of free will. And this is something that we adopted, believe it or not, from Greek philosophy. Aristotle had said that if there's going to be a sea battle tomorrow, it was always the fact that there was going to be a sea battle, regardless whether God exists or not. He's just looking at it logically. And that would mean, then, that whether or not there's going to be a sea battle tomorrow is already determined because it's already a fact. But modern philosophers answer Aristotle by saying that whether or not there's going to be a sea battle tomorrow is a contingent fact. It is not a necessary fact, and hence it does not imply predetermination. Does it then imply predetermination within religion? No. The Pakistani scholar Muhammad Iqbal has actually taught us something. He looked at the way in which the idea of predetermination came to be a very core Islamic teaching, and he showed us ways in which we can actually surmount and transcend that. We do not have to think of the omniscience of God as such, as implying a predetermination. He said that the knowledge of God is related to his creative will. So then, we shouldn't think of the future as a timeline already drawn, and then somehow there in the mind of God. We should think of the future as being made by God. And in that case then, we shouldn't think of the whole span of life as though it is a stretch of film and so that God can look at the end and see how it is. We should think that the future frames of film are not just one frame in each place, but a whole CD-ROM full of images. And it is up to God to bring that image which He wants in response to our freely chosen actions. So in which case, God is omniscient in that He knows all of the possibilities that could ever exist, that could ever occur. He knows all of the future choices that could ever be chosen. And yet, it is in response to the freely chosen choice that God will bring about the future and make it happen. So in that case, God is still omnipotent, He is still omniscient, and human beings are still free. So within my religious concept, I have transcended the difficulty of predetermination, and it will be up to Dr. Carlo to do the same for his.
My question is much shorter than the other one. I've had a bit of a trouble understanding, because there seemed to be a major self-contradiction you had earlier on in the lecture, and that was specifically how the Quran is a revelation, especially since it seems to have been a compilation after the Prophet's death, at least by 2 years. How is the collection of papers, of events that happened at least 2 years previously, that were heard and repeated, presumably in many teachings, compiled by presumably many different people over an extended period of time, how is that then a revelation and not a compilation of events? previously, and then in that compilation, why do the numbers have to mean anything if that is then the creation of a whole bunch of human beings in response to what could have been or could not have been a revelation previously?
Okay, I understand your question, and I understand the reason for your question. I think the presentation time was so short and so much material had to be covered that I had to go over that very quickly. But if I'm to expand that explanation a little bit more, we know of the Prophet Muhammad because he lived in the full light of history. And what we know is that over a period of 23 years, he was reciting these portions of scripture. Usually I should have 2 minutes to answer, no? Yeah, I just thought okay. So, over 23 years, he recited bits and pieces over several different occasions. And his followers memorized these pieces. They started to recite them publicly in prayers and so on. And they wrote them down in whatever writing materials were available. Until after his death, when it was thought that perhaps the memory work might not be sufficient to preserve these materials, it was found necessary to bring all of the diverse writing materials together and rewrite them in the form of a complete book. And that was done. So there was no conscious effort at that time to make 19 of something or to make the land and water agree with the reality of what it is. It was just simply done in such a spontaneous and coincidental manner, without a central planning, you might say, to make sure that all of these numbers would coincide. And now that we study that written work, 1400 years later, we see all of these coincidences. And now we cannot credit it to the work of those individuals, nor could we credit it to the creative work of the Prophet Muhammad himself. And it seems that the best explanation for this is that there is intelligence involved, but it's not the people's intelligence, it is a divine revelation that is given in this text.
Sorry. There's just one other thing. How are you sure that there was no artistic impression by the people who are compiling it? How are you sure that it wasn't worded in such a way that some of the numerical tendencies that you mentioned, which can also be arbitrary. Now, I'm a mathematician myself, so I know you can pretty much look at any document and pull whatever numbers you want out of it. But even given so, how are you sure that the people when writing it did not have an artistic impression of themselves and change it so that some of these effects would occur?
Yes, the answer to that is just the nature of the discoveries that we have found. That, for example, words that are antonyms of each other used an equal number of times, and not small numbers, 145 times in the case of life and death. For the compilers, when we read the reports of how the compilation was done, it is quite clear that the compilers had no idea that they would make sure that the word day would occur 365 times. It is just a later reflection on the Quran and deep study that brings together these facts. And we cannot credit it to those individuals, nor could we credit it to coincidence. And the best explanation for that is that it is a revelatory work from the Almighty God. For example, if you're asked by your professor to compile a work that is 2,000 words long and make it exactly 2,000 words, you know the difficulty you're going to have. If you're told, use this word just exactly this many times and make sure that its antonym is also the same number of times. If you're told that you're to make a composition and it is to have a number of letters that will be divisible flush by 19. Now that's difficulty in itself. And what we notice is that Surah 96 that I referred to has the first 5 verses, which were the first revelation given to the Prophet Muhammad. It has 76 letters. That's 19 times 4. The rest of the surah has 209 letters, which is 19 times 11. Surah 50 starts with the mysterious letter Q, which I'll mention for simplicity. And it's so nobody knows what that Q is in the Quran. And now we discover that that letter Q is used in that surah, in that chapter, exactly 57 times, which is 19 times 3. Now, there are many other surahs that start with such mysterious letters, and we still don't know what they mean. There is another surah that has Q at the beginning, that's Surah 42. And when we count the number of occurrences of the letter Q in that surah, again it is 57. What accounts for this coincidence? I have to stop.
Mr. Ellie, do you assume then that there's greater significance to these numbers that your scholars have yet to figure out?
Well, they could be greater significance that we don't know. They could be greater significance in a lot of things.
Yeah, like the I-145 or like...
There could be other patterns that we don't know. But the very fact that we discovered these coincidences is an indication of something bigger and greater that we can attribute to the materialistic worldview.
Yeah, I don't know if you've actually shown that to be before the fact. You know, it sounds tidy, but it just seems to me like there's some very creative numerical people.
Yeah, you see, this is the point. You see, when you think about Dr. Carlo, you want to credit it to some intelligence, and I agree with you. That should be our starting point. Go back in history and find out, is it possible that some human being worked this in? And I promise you that the historical records about the compilation of the Quran is such that you will not be able to credit this to specific human beings.
Oh, well, nobody's going to say, oh, and by the way, I came up with 145.
We're just going to have to go on to the next question. Sorry about that. And given these whole questions in 4 minutes, they're great.
Just not looking at mathematics in the Quran, how would you explain such thing as the atom, where the Quran talks about the atom, or about how the babies develop in the womb, which was just discovered in these early centuries? How would you explain it?
Oh, I'd be interested to see what the exact passages of the Quran said. I don't know.
Such as, I'm not sure exactly how they worded it, but I believe in the third stage of Mount Nabi, it looks like ground beef, like a chewed up ground beef. When humans actually went into the womb, it kind of looked like ground beef or chewed up.
Yeah.
How would you explain things like that?
Almost spontaneous abortion. Spontaneous abortion, which would have happened an awful lot back then due to the lack of Medicare. So these people actually would have seen 3-month-old fetuses that looked, as you say, like ground up beef.
But what about the atom?
The atom? Latter part of the 5th century BC, Eusebius and Democritus proposed the first atomic theory. How did these Greeks figure that out? And yet, they did it. Coincidence? No. They just saw that things could be divided further and further and further and further. And it made sense to them. Atom, it's the Greek term, meaning not to cut. Indivisible. That's what the actual term means, and for good reason.
So you think Arabic scholars knew that afterwards?
Perhaps. Perhaps. I mean, the Greeks, latter part of the 5th century, proposed the first atomic theory. So it's quite possible that the word did spread.
Seems like a sort of possibility.
Yeah, it does. Okay.
Mr. Ali, would you like to respond?
Yeah, in response to that, we can sometimes find information which is there in the Quran, which is different from the information that was generally available and concurrent at the time of the Quranic revelation. And as we study this book, we become amazed and think that this could not be just simply the invention of the Prophet Muhammad, because we might expect him to report simply the ideas which are prevalent in his society. Dr. Maurice Bouquet, the French doctor, did a study on this, and his work is entitled The Bible, the Quran, and Science. And what he showed, in fact, is that the Quran did not just simply report false information that was available in its day and unscientific conceptions of the universe the way they were. But the Quran has actually transcended that. And this is an indication of the divine influence behind the Quranic revelation. And specific mention was made not only by him, but also by Dr. Keith Moore, Professor Emeritus of the University of Toronto, who did a study of the statements in the Quran regarding the growth and development of the human embryo. Now, initially, one might think that the accuracy of information that is there might be due to the fact that people have worked with babies and these were studied. But what Dr. Moore showed is that there is information regarding the very early stage of development that could not have been studied without the use of the microscope, which I must remind you was invented 1,000 years after the Quranic revelation. So the Quran talks about the human being developing into a thing that clings, like a leech. And in fact, that is found to be an exact description of how the human baby looks at 24 days old. And then the Quran says that that thing is developed into a chewed lump, a mudghah. And that is, according to Dr. Moore, an exact representation of the human embryo at 28 days old. It's not 3 months, and at that time, the human embryo is smaller than a grain of rice. So that could not have been studied without the use of a microscope, and the fact that that information is there in the Quran, again, is for Muslims a further indication that this is a revelatory work not to be credited to the mind of Muhammad alone.
Get the next question, please.
I have a question.
Come on.
A question for both the gentlemen. First of all, Dr. Carlo, you talked about the knowledge claim and causality, and you were discussing that back in the day they did not have the know-how, and therefore they filled the gap with thought as being the best explanation. Perhaps from being a scientific mind, you rely on the scientific method, right? You would explain the 4.6 billion years in terms of science, in terms of organ-to-organ dating, or whatever the atomic things are. Therefore, to a degree, we can also infer that you have some sort of faith in the scientific method. You have a faith in your work. You have a faith in your findings and how you justify them. So therefore, while you have not presented a reason to believe the leap in faith in your scientific method, you've also not presented a reason not to believe the leap in faith for there being a God. Could you please comment on that?
Sure, I'll do that right now. My leap of faith in science, as you call it, first of all, you're committing what's known as the fallacy of equivocation. You're equating faith in science with faith in religion, and they are not the same. Faith in science is because matters are empirical. That means they can be confirmed or falsified according to our five senses. The hallmark of science, of course, is that it is testable. Which is not testable, it's not science. We cannot test with God. We cannot test with Allah. It'd be interesting if we could, but we can't. So on that account, those two types of faith are quite different. The reason I put more stock in the faith of science is only because it is testable. Okay? Now, I'm not so much an advocate of science that I will totally, blindly cut myself off of the possibility that exists that the universe was intended. That's as far as I'll go in terms of the possibility of a God, is that the universe could have been intended. After that, I couldn't add a single quality of what such a God could actually be, because I've had no personal experience myself. And the fault with religions, of course, is that they do define what this intender is like, and they add up entities way, way, way beyond necessity, and that's what gets them into trouble. So the faith, therefore, for religion is entirely different from that in science. It's a blind faith that does not rely on confirmation or falsification through testability.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I think the questioner has raised a very important issue in that we do proceed in life with faith to some degree. In a lot of things, even in the workings of science. When we pursue science, for example, with the understanding that science is a worthwhile exercise. And that includes some faith. If you believe that the universe is going to end tomorrow, then science is not a useful exercise. But you believe that there's going to be some continuity, for example. You believe also that the universe is working in an orderly fashion. And in fact, what has been pointed out by Michael Poole, science lecturer at the University in London, England, is that, in his book Faith and Science, is that in fact it was the belief in God that made the universe to be seen as something that could be studied scientifically. If in fact you didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow, if things were not orderly, if you did not believe in a God who made things orderly, then you could not, there was no order there for you to study. And science is proceeding on the faith that we do live in an orderly universe, that it is worthwhile to study it, and that getting knowledge is something good. So you are actually starting with certain bits of faith. But what is more important to our discussion tonight is that if Dr. Carlo admits that it's possible that that God exists, and he lives as though that God does not exist, well then he is also living according to a certain faith.
We'll do another question here, and hopefully if you might able to stay a little bit longer. Thanks.
Dr. Carlo, you were mentioning, like you were talking before about the miracles, like they were mentioned by another speaker, about miracles being mentioned in religion and how your response would be to that. I'm just adding on one extra miracle, which is found in the Quran, which says that two oceans meet side by side, they join, they touch each other, but they do not mix. One is salty and the other one isn't salty. And that's mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah. And I was just wondering, like, isn't that convincing at all? If something like that is mentioned so many years ago in the Quran, I don't think back in the days someone went and scooped some water from there, and tested it, you know?
Right. Take a boat ride down the St. Lawrence. Take a boat ride down the St. Lawrence. Meet the ocean. And you'll see with fresh water. Meet salt water. This will become visible. And you can make the same types of conclusions, whatever you want to say. You may think that God has somehow done this. I'm not exactly...
No, it's not.
Sorry, your point, but these things occur wherever fresh waters meet oceanic flows. I mean, it's just part of a natural ecosystem and a waterway. So I'm missing your point.
Well, what I'm saying is that it's been written for thousands of years. And do you think, like, they're capable of just picking things out like that thousands of years ago?
Sure, they're just making observations. They're just writing down what they happen to see. How did atomic theory come about 2,500 years ago when they didn't have any particle accelerators or electron microscopes? They simply had the world around them and made observations. That's what science is.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, to just speak on that very quickly, what the questioner is pointing towards is modern studies that are being done in the Quran, asking the question, could all of the information in the Quran be really credited reasonably to the mind of the Prophet Muhammad, a man who lived some 1400 years ago in the desert conditions of Mecca, Medina, and in the environments there? People might want to ask, was this man a sailor? Did he go out to sea and see how the waves operate and how the water is mixed or refused to mix? Now, when we think about salty, sweet water, I mean, common sense tells you that somehow they go to mix. And yet the Quran tells us that the two waters meet, but there is a barrier between them so that they do not mix. Now, it's remarkable that a document from that time, coming as a recitation from this man Muhammad, should include this particular detail. And details like this, it points towards what Muslims have been saying, that this is a revelation from the Almighty God. It would be too much to credit all of this information to the mind of the man Muhammad, who was the first person known to be reciting this book.
Taylor's notice this 2,500 years ago. Yeah, and then this was well documented and recorded.
Yes.
What he believed water was the fundamental nature of all the world. He made great observations of water. And this is well known among the Greeks. It could have equally been well known among the Persians and others as well. Why couldn't this kind of crept into Muhammad's mind?
Yes. Yeah. You see, when you speak of these issues, Dr. Carlo, you are imagining that it must have happened so. Just like the numbers. Somebody must have
No, I was
those
just
numbers
trying to
in.
come up with another explanation.
Exactly.
Rather than jumping up to a god.
I know.
I'm trying to explain it now.
What you should be aware of is that detailed studies are done on this, and we have thought about other possible explanations.
Who's
What we
doing
know,
detailed studies? Stephen Hawking or Islamic scholars?
let me continue. What we do know about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, his environment, his whereabouts, his interactions with other communities and societies and individuals, do not make it possible for us to credit this information to him and just simply attribute it to natural sources in his environment. There is something more here than what could be naturally explained. And some works have been published on this. I've mentioned a work which I recommend for you to study, The Bible, the Quran, and Science by Dr. Maurice Bouquet.
That's one more of this. Yeah, that's one.
And of course the other.
Gentlemen, I apologize to those who are waiting to do questions, but we should be going on to the summary now for 5 minutes each. And hopefully afterwards you'd still be able to give them the questions. Hopefully they'll still be able to stay behind and answer all your things. So if you have 5 minute conclusions for starting with Shabir. Thanks.
Thank you very much, folks, for sitting through this entire evening. I really appreciate the attention with which you have listened to our speeches. And I thank you, Dr. Carlo, for making this an engaging and worthwhile evening tonight. Really, I benefit from the interaction, from the knowledge exchange, from the thinking that we have to do as a result of all of this. And I'd like in these last 5 minutes, the first, just look very briefly at some of the ground we have covered. You will recall that I gave 5 very important reasons why we should believe that God exists. One is the cosmological argument, to say that we do have something here, and nothing comes from nothing. This something must have a reason, an explanation for it. And the best explanation for this is that God created the universe. Notice that Dr. Carlo is admitting that this is plausible to believe so, that there is such a being, but he's saying this is not the only explanation. He thinks that it is just as good to suppose that the universe came into existence by chance. For example, by citing the possibility of the universe coming out of a quantum vacuum. But even Dr. Carlo has admitted on previous occasions that even that quantum vacuum would need an explanation. As Keith Ward has said in his book entitled God, Chance, and Necessity, in fact, the only thing that does not require an explanation is that being which exists in and of itself, a necessary being, and that is God. And to him, that is a simpler explanation than to say that the universe came into existence by chance. Think of it. The universe is a contingent being. It could or could not exist. If it does exist, it needs an explanation. If its explanation itself is a contingent being which could or could not exist, then that also needs an explanation. But if we go back to a being that does not require an explanation, that is a necessary being, then there is no sense of asking who created God. Our search for an explanation actually ends in a necessary being who contains the possibility for everything that could emerge in the future, all of the future effects. And this would explain a large number of phenomena. It would explain the facts of evolution. It would explain all of our observations. It would explain why we have free will, even though that being is still omniscient and omnipotent. Notice that we have looked at the design argument. And Dr. Carlo did not deny that there is design in the universe, nor did I deny the theory of evolution. But I have maintained that when we see design, whether working through evolution or anywhere else, we must posit the possibility of a designing creator. Notice when Dr. Carlo talked to us about the example of the bridge, what did we end up with? We ended up with some intelligent designers who put that bridge into place and came up with a clever way of burning the board so that the bricks would fall into place. So when we see design, we automatically posit a designer. Now, the fact of natural processes does not, for a Muslim, exclude the belief in God. When a Muslim says that God gave us a meal on our table, a Muslim does not exclude all of the natural causes, the processes by which that meal came. But we say that it is God who brought all of this and made it possible. And without God, nothing would be possible. The universe would not be here. We have seen Dr. Carlo making a projection presentation here tonight. Now, without his computer, there would be no presentation. For us, what we live in is one huge presentation generated by God, who is the computer that generates us and continues to generate us continuously. And so, without God, nothing works. So, no matter where we look, even though we can discover the causes for things, God does not receive from our thinking. Yes, he might receive from certain gaps that we used to explain before by just simply citing God, but the explanation of God as an explanation for everything altogether never receives from our minds and is a continual experience for the believer. And so, to ask why God does not do things in particular ways, for example, why doesn't he cause a few less Turks to die? That is to ask from the point of view of saying, well, I know that if a few less Turks died, this would be the variation that would affect all of the variables to such a degree, and this would be the result. Unless one can make such a calculation, one does not know the full effect of what one is proposing. But God may have things happen that are not pleasant to us, but are for good reasons that he knows. And good reasons which we will discover as we see the entire canvas of God's creative work. When we look at one spot on a canvas, that's the only color we will see. But if we step back, we might see that that green spot we have been looking at is actually on a white overall canvas, and the entire thing is white. So we might look at evil and suffering here, but when we step back and we see the entire plan of happiness forever with God, then we realize that God's entire plan is a good one, and that is the one we choose. Thank you very much.
And if we could have the last word from Dr. Carlo. Thanks.
Okay, Shabir. Very well presented side of the argument tonight for this particular debate. You mentioned that nothing comes from nothing, that God had to have been necessary in order for all contingent things to be. Contingent things are things like you and I, this building and these cameras and this overhead and various things that could otherwise not have been. Mr. Ali is defining God as a necessary being that could not exist. God has to exist. His existence has to be in order for everything else to be. This, of course, presupposes the concept of causality, and cause and effect. And it presupposes a concept of causality under which Mr. Ali is lost. It seems unfathomable to him to imagine that there is an effect that can come about in ways that do not have causes which precede it, which is very anthropocentric of him. It's a very human-like quality to limit himself under that rubric of causality, that if it doesn't fit under our particular understanding of causality, it must not be the case. Well, I find that to be very limited thinking. As a good skeptic, I can at least imagine the possibility under which conditions could have emerged that a universe came into being totally by accident, without the necessary cause of a necessary being. A quantum vacuum needs explanation, but apparently a necessary God does not. Why not? Well, he's just necessary. Why is that? Well, because he's God. Well, why is he God? Well, he's necessary, you see. Which makes him God, because it's necessary. So what we have is a circular argument. We don't really find out anything really important about God. The argument simply goes in a circle. Our universe is contingent. There had to be a necessary being. Very interesting of you, sir, to borrow from Thomas Aquinas. Very nice. Fine Catholic scholar. However, Aquinas was not necessarily right. No convincing connection exists between a necessary being that does not need to be created and a self-sufficient universe. If God does not need to be explained away in terms of any causal forces creating it, why? And again, we will get into a circular argument. Well, because it's God, which means what? Which means it's necessary. It doesn't require anything to cause it. It's self-sufficient. Oh, well, wherever you see God, just erase that and put universe. And I don't know why I can't get away with saying universe simply came into being in causal ways we have yet begun to fathom. So I'm willing to look at my limited knowledge about the universe and accept that and realize that we are all equal in that respect. And it is those who extend beyond this level of ignorance and humility, who maintain that the world is just a particular way, I find they are often led to contradictions and inconsistencies in their thinking. And this can generate all kinds of problems: physical problems, human problems, right? Biblical problems, right? Thou shalt not touch thyself, right? Well, what do you say to a 13-year-old boy with raging hormones and a jar full of Pond's cold cream? Yeah, you shouldn't really, you better not. So you got biology working away on one level, and Holy Scriptures working away on another level. There seems to be a bit of a clash there. Who am I to believe? Well, God. No biology. Not God. Go for it. Toss up. No, don't. You got Satan, you got an angel. I'm wondering, well, what should I do? So it's hormones versus scriptures. And what's going to win out? Because if hormones win out, you've got some major guilt on a 13-year-old boy. And I can bet there's a few 13-year-old boys who are sitting here right now. Well, actually, not me, of course, but, you know. Anyhow, where was it? So, no convincing connection between necessary being and a created universe. I believe, in reference to the dead Turks example, that God has a calculated plan. Well, he better, because that just does not make sense to me. That many people ought not to die if such an all-loving God exists. He should just not allow that. Just don't allow it. Just show up. Let us know you're here. Hey, I'm a team player. Just let me know, coach. Put me in. You know, I'm willing to play. I want to play ball, God. Put me in. And I'm all for it. I'm all for your plan. Just show it to me. Or show it a little bit more clearly. To conclude, I'd just like to say that I really think we are the intelligent designers of God, not the other way around. He did not create us. We invented him. Thank you.